This week on Theater Talk.
There are a few interesting things coming this season, but there's a lot of stuff that somebody described to me as kind of high-end dinner theater. And falling into
Minus the dinner.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, we begin another season in New York theater.
And our 18th year of Theater Talk.
Unbelievable.
And some of us have not aged a bit.
Well, thank you, darling.
And we've been on the air for 18 years, but for the last, I think, almost 10 now, we always begin the new season at Theater Talk with a preview of all the shows that are coming up in New York. And for many years, we have had a panel that has aged terribly, I'm afraid to say. But we are very loyal.
Now stop.
No,
now
but
stop.
That's good. That's fine. And they've been with us for a long time because they have such insights into this business that we never want to not have them with us to guide us through the upcoming theater season. And so we are joined tonight
I don't know
by Jesse Green from New York Magazine.
Huh? I'm sorry, I'm too old. I was asleep. What?
And Michael Musto.
What'd you say, Sonny? I hope you're enjoying my old pores in HD here.
Michael Musto from The Village Voice, and the oldest one of all, Patrick Pacheco from New York One and the Los Angeles Times. And you've been covering the theater, Patrick, how many years now?
About 105. I think it's my 105th anniversary.
Well, gentlemen, welcome for the 10th time or something like that to Theater Talk. All right, let's jump right in and look at some of the big shows that are coming to Broadway. The one that people seem to be buzzing about right now is Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, the Bart Scher, who directed South Pacific, his musical version of the Almodovar movie with Patti LuPone, Sherry Renee Scott, and Laura Benanti.
Yeah.
What?
Brian Stokes Mitchell.
Right. What are we hearing about this, Patrick?
Well, not much because it hasn't started previews, but it sounds really promising because of those names that you just rattled off. It's going to be interesting to see if David Yazbek and Jeffrey Lane can put this really convoluted plot into making some sense. It's all about, people getting poisoned by gazpacho and somebody's ex ending up in somebody else's bed, and it's a real soap opera that was a lot of fun as an Almodovar movie, but I think it's a really promising team, and I think Yazbek's a great...
David Yazbek, who did The Full Monty, the score of The Full
That's
Monty,
right.
and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
And Jeffrey Lane, who wrote the adapted Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Jesse, it seems to me that the tricky thing with something like this, though, is that Almodovar has such a distinctive, unique style. Do you just copy his style, or do you try to make it something else?
Well, you have to translate it, but translate it smartly. And, you can tell by the casting of such recessive, shy performers that they're really going for total reinterpretation of the material. I like Patrick, I have high hopes for the show, both because the original material is so delightful and because these people have all proved themselves on other shows that you might not have thought could be made into successful Broadway shows.
Michael, couldn't this just be unbearably campy, though?
That's an oxymoron. That's like that's like Army intelligence or something. Interestingly, the prevalent trend this season in musicals are adaptations of sort of quirky yet popular films. Priscilla, which is kind of La Cage meets Mamma Mia. The Bus is going to emerge as a breakout star. Elf, which I didn't realize was ready for canonization yet. Catch Me If You Can, Sister Act. Women on the Verge falls into that trend, but it's a foreign film. It's Almodovar, that's the correct pronunciation. And it's a higher class of quirky yet popular film. You know what I mean? It's a screwball comedy, but it's got pedigree. And I think the names that they've drawn to this musical version have pedigree as well. Mm-hmm. So I do have high hopes. It's the only thing I'm really buzzing about.
Yeah.
Certainly more than Driving Miss Daisy.
Now, I'll let you take a whack at that. Now, Driving Miss Daisy, I agree with you. There are a few interesting things coming this season, but there's a lot of stuff that somebody described to me as kind of high-end dinner theater. And falling into
Minus the dinner.
Falling into that category is something like Driving Miss Daisy, with Vanessa Redgrave, with James Earl Jones, but that is just a dull little old play. Do we need that on Broadway, Patrick?
Yeah, with those stars, absolutely. I mean, it's not dinner theater. I mean, it's got a great brand name. It won the Oscar for Best Film of that particular year. It's got 2 really well-written roles, and I think they'll play it incredibly. I'm really looking forward to it. And if you take it as a litmus test, what you would invest in, what you would actually put your money behind, I would invest in that.
Yeah, it's interesting that, first of all, it's interesting to me to see what let's say a middle-brow play what can happen to it when highbrow performers really get their teeth into it. And that is interesting to me, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't see it. And
we didn't mention it's Joanne Worley and Nipsey Russell.
No, that's the road company.
That's the dinner theater company.
That's dinner theater.
But the other thing is that it is the only show in the fall, I'm leaving the spring out, that I think has really major Hollywood-type stars in it. The last few years we've been seeing more and more these invading, marauding, middle-aged actresses trying to, resuscitate their careers and stuff like that. That is not happening this fall.
Does Al Pacino count?
Al Pacino is the only middle-aged actress left. What did I say?
Actress.
I know.
But I agree that obviously James Earl Jones and Vanessa Redgrave are powerhouse performers. There's no way we're going to miss this. I just wish we could move away from the play about the noble black servant and the uppity white person who kind of realizes black people are okay.
Yeah,
But I think it can be reinterpreted. I mean, it depends on the emphasis of it.
It'll be set at Studio 54.
They're switching roles every other performance, so that's going to make it totally different.
Oh, yeah.
I think you guys are being much too cynical about a really solid play by Alfred Urey, which
You
I think
are
deserves to be revived.
You are Mr. Middlebrow, as long as I know.
Well, at least it hasn't been revived
I
on Broadway
aspire
yet.
to be middle
It's
brow.
not like
It's never
another
played on
revival.
Broadway yet.
All right,
It's never been on Broadway, period.
All right,
Yes.
I want to elevate this conversation to some serious theater. The Pee-wee Herman Show is coming in. I mean,
It's going to be at an adult theater.
right. We should say, though, in fact, the theater that the Pee-wee Herman Show was at for many years was a porno house.
And he was there every
Is this
night, so he
such-
knows the place.
Why is
really?
this
What
such an
theater?
issue, this thing with this guy's little arrest? Why can't you all leave it alone, including Ben Brantley, for God's sake, who had to bring it up in a column?
We should say, for those who don't know, Pee-wee
Lay
Herman,
off it.
Pee-wee Herman was arrested in a
I did.
pornography house many years ago, right? And you interviewed him. Didn't you interview him? From
Not
New
at the
York
time.
But you interviewed him
I
recently.
wasn't there. Like Susan, I agree. I sort of think, first of all, is it really such a big deal? And also, it was many years ago, and it has very little. If it weren't for the contrast between the character and who the character was aimed at, and what he was supposedly caught doing, no one would even care. It would probably be a boon to his career.
You interviewed him for New York Magazine. What's your sense of what this show is going to be like?
I
It
think
seems a
it's
little
go-
creepy to me.
I think it's going to be just exactly what it was when he originally did this show and versions of it. He's updated it a little bit, perhaps to account for the fact that everybody's about 75 years old in the cast by now.
The reviews that it got in Los Angeles appeared to make it a very safe show.
Yeah, it's very family oriented. There won't be any replaying of that unfortunate incident on the
So
stage.
it sounds bland and boring to me,
No,
doesn't it, to you,
no,
Michael?
no. We've all seen that early Pee Wee's Playhouse stuff, the stuff he did before he went on CBS with the children's show, and it was funny and wonderful. And isn't he going to go back to that?
He was very edgy in his show. That was the most advanced child's show since Soupy Sales. That was a long time ago, however. Now he's gone from an arrested child to an arrested adult. Kidding. I actually don't care about what he did, and I think we should focus on the fact that he's basically
artist.
a man-child who is deeply disturbed in a hilarious way. And I am actually looking forward to this way more than Lombardi.
His characters are very theatrical as well.
Patrick, there was a play that you were old enough to have seen the original production of, La Bête, which was done on Broadway in '91 or something like that. It ran about 4 or 5 performances, a big, spectacular fiasco of the time, very expensive fiasco at the time. It's coming back from London. What's the point of reviving this old flop?
I think when you cast Mark Rylance in it, I think that's the best reason for it to come here.
Fine actor from London.
Yeah,
Not well known over here, though.
I think it's going to be a virtuoso performance. He won the Tony for Boyne and gave that sort of weird acceptance speech, if you remember that. But he's a brilliant, brilliant actor and really suited for this role. I think it's going to be a tour de force with him in it. And I think it's going to get a second chance. I actually quite liked it. So, of course, it flopped the first time around. But I think giving it a second chance is probably going to be very intriguing.
And it's in verse, isn't it, the whole play, Michael?
It's perverse. Yeah. I think the first scene is 8 hours of just one sentence. It's very James Joycean. And I actually like the idea of reviving something that wasn't well received the first time. Most of these are pretty safe revivals or transfers or middle brown movies turned into musicals. This is something that maybe deserves a second look, and apparently has a star performance. Plus Joanna Lumley's in it, David Hyde Pierce.
Good
Yeah.
cast, yeah.
Boing Boing was a flop the first time out, and was a huge
Indeed, that's
success
right,
with
that's
Mark
right.
Rylance and the director Matthew Warchus.
In a way, the fewer performances it had the first time, the less it is a revival, since no one actually saw it.
Yeah.
I would like to ask about what we know about Spider-Man, Take Back the Dark.
Well, I should probably recuse myself because a good friend is working with Julie Taymor on it. That said, it has a big...
It's brilliant.
Oh, I'm rooting for it. But that said, it has a big target on its back, thanks to some of us in this room. And it's, the press is probably gunning for it, but it does have Julie Taymor and Bono and The Edge, and I think it's certainly highly anticipated.
What do you know, Jesse Green?
Well, I was given some kind of spider venom that prevents me from speaking.
From Michael?
No. I've seen some of it, and I've certainly seen all the designs.
Have you been into the theater?
I have, and
And what does it look like?
It looks like $50 million. I'm not kidding. We've all laughed at, appropriately, what happened with the terrible financing and all of that, but it looks like that amount of money. At least there's that. What is filling that, I can't say yet, but I'm not allowed to say yet. But it's an amazing imaginative achievement on her part and her designer's part.
Michael, can you say something honest about the show? These two guys they're in the pockets of Spider-Man. This one, he
What do you think
recuses
of 60?
himself because his friend is involved in it, and this one has been given a special private tour and has been co-opted. Are you pure when it comes to Are you an objective journalist when it comes to Spider-Man?
No, they paid me off as well, and
Where do you
they
think the
sent me
60
some free
million went
spiders. And, no, look, Julie Taymor does have a great visual sense. I just saw her movie of The Tempest with Helen Mirren, and it's visceral, it's visual.
Is it pretentious?
Yes. And, no, actually, she brings it down to earth in a way. But I think she's going to do amazing visual things. The show, unfortunately, is going to have to run 50 years without one discounted ticket to even break even.
Yeah.
And by the way, bloody Andrew Jackson is now just bloody Andrew Jackson. They only have half the money. That's a sidebar there.
The thing about Spider-Man is you can spend 50, 60, I think it's up to $65 million now on the fabulous set and all that kind of stuff. I got a look at a script 6 or 7 months ago, so I'm sure it's gone through some drafts. And I got to say, script struck me as being kind of all over the place. Not exactly, well structured like My Fair Lady. And if that story is not very compelling or interesting, after 20 minutes, all that stuff it becomes like a Cirque du Soleil show.
But Cirque du
Yeah.
Soleil makes millions of dollars.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I
it
don't
does.
necessarily
take your
think-
point,
Yeah, but I
but-
don't necessarily think Spider-Man's going to draw the Cirque du Soleil
the new
audience.
the new young sensibility to like all this disjointed stuff they like with great special effects. It might succeed on a level that neither you nor I can understand.
Well, the fact is that the Spider-Man material is geared towards basically teenage
Yes.
boys who do not go to Broadway shows.
they can't afford it.
Similar to Lombardi, which is for the football audience, which don't line up to see Broadway shows. I'm sorry.
Jesse, you were going to make a
Well,
point?
you may well be right about the money issue. I have no idea how this show could ever earn back the investment. Maybe it could, but if we put that aside, that's not our concern really. I'm interested in what Julie Taymor is going to do with this material, and that's not just because I'm writing an article about it and and all of that, but it is classic American material, and with her visuals applied to it, even if the script isn't as good as the visuals, I want to see what that is, and I think a lot of people will.
What do we know about the score? U2's score.
To the extent that I've heard it, and I think they previewed one on one of the morning shows with the guy who's playing Spider-Man, singing
Reed
it.
Carney, yeah.
And it sounded great. It sounded wonderful. Again, I'm old enough, being 105, to think that if you don't have a good book, you don't have much. But I think
That was the problem with the Cheetah Rivera show, right, Patrick?
It had a very good book by Terrence McNally. Thank you very much.
Patrick Pacheco.
But wasn't the biggest musical of all time something called Cats?
Yeah.
It had no book.
Yeah,
There was nothing going
well,
on
that's
there.
my
Yeah,
point.
I think that's the point.
It's
That's
the
the point that I
spectacle.
was
It
making.
becomes an event. It becomes something where the tourists come into town,
Exactly.
whether they're young boys or not. And we got to see Spider-Man. Did you hear about Spider-Man?
Exactly.
We'll see. But just to put this all in perspective for you, Spider-Man has about the same advance that Al Pacino in Merchant of Venice does, which is to say about $4.5, $5 million.
Is that good or bad?
That for Al Pacino, it's very good because that's a non-musical play that costs $2 million to put up. For a show that costs $65 million, I think you want more in the till than just $5.5 million.
Well,
So.
it's a long way off.
Moving on to Al Pacino in The Merchant of Venice. It's amazing to me that after all of these years, Al Pacino is still such a huge draw.
Yeah, I find that surprising, not because he isn't incredibly talented, but because where's the platform that he's coming from?
Yeah, he doesn't make movies that are hugely popular
Right.
anymore.
No, but he's in HBO movies. He just won, I think, an Emmy Award for playing Kevorkian.
Yeah,
He was in Angels
right.
in America.
That's
So
right.
he reaches a huge audience through that. And thanks to Revival channels and TCM, he's big to a whole new generation.
just iconic.
From Serpico and all of his
Exactly.
classic films.
Yeah, and he is wonderful in this Merchant of Venice.
Is
so
he?
the word of mouth, yeah, oh, it's terrific.
Well, we all saw, some of you saw in the
I
park.
just went to the party.
When you
Amazing buffet.
That should be the title of your next book. I just went to the party.
And an actor as iconic as Al Pacino, Brendan Fraser, from Dudley Do Right and Georgia of the Jungle, is coming to Broadway in a play called Elling. What is Elling?
Elling is a play based on a movie, then adapted and performed in England about about two men who are released from a mental hospital and have to learn to live in the real world.
Oh God.
They're going to have to steer away from the whimsy.
who's the other actor?
Dennis O'Hare.
Dennis
Oh,
O'Hare.
Dennis O'Hare.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie that's based on the Norwegian?
Was it The
film?
Bucket List? What is it? By the way,
Dumb and Dumber.
last year we were all complaining that stars are coming and polluting Broadway, and this year it's like there aren't enough stars polluting Broadway. But guess what? There are, because Ben Stiller's coming, Nicole Kidman, Brendan Fraser, take them or leave them. There was somebody else.
Chris Rock is coming too.
Yeah.
Well, this is all in the spring.
Yeah,
Are we-
the big
I
stars
know,
are coming in
but
the
I
spring.
mean, we're getting a star-studded season. So we can start complaining again. They're ruining everything, taking things away from the real actors.
I want to talk about a musical that I like very much called The Scottsboro Boys that was done at the Vineyard Theater last year. It's quite a big risk for Fran and Barry Weissler, who are producing it, because while some people admired it, the New York Times, Ben Brantley, didn't like it. And usually producers would just close up shop, pack it in, not go back to Broadway. But they're bringing this show by John Kander and the late Fred Ebb, directed by Susan Stroman, in. Is there going to be an audience for this, do you think, Jesse?
Well, it gets excellent word of mouth. When it was done off Broadway, when it was done at the Guthrie this summer, the word of mouth was really unbelievable. And whether that's enough on Broadway anymore, I don't know. There is precedent for Ben Brantley eating his hat with Gypsy, as an example. He didn't like it the first time, but they worked on it some more, and then he gave it the money review that it needed. It could happen. But whether without that it will get what it deserves, what I think it deserves.
You liked it?
Yeah, I did like it.
What I'm interested about it, though, is because Susan Stroman, who I think is a very good director, really crashed and burned with Young Frankenstein. And I get the sense how inventive she is here. She's really back to show the industry that she hasn't lost her touch.
It's beautifully staged.
Yeah, it is beautifully staged. And I think that's the idea. I think that's the whole difference between the theatricality of, say, the Pittman Painters and Brief Encounter and the directors of those shows, and a director like Susan Stroman, who had this huge budget for Young Frankenstein, is now doesn't have a huge budget and does her most inventive work.
See, Julie Taymor should be directing Driving Miss Daisy. That would be interesting.
The challenge of a show like the Scottsboro Boys is there's not an emotional center there. It's kind of disparate. It's spread out among all
Because of
these
the concept
characters.
of the show.
Because of
it's
the concept of
deliberate,
the show.
But it does make it a harder show for. I mean, you have to appreciate it as a concept before you can really get into
and
it.
the concept is that it is the story of the famous civil rights trial, the Scottsboro Boys, who were wrongly accused of raping two women in the South in the 30s, I believe. But it's done in the context, in the framework of a minstrel show, a real old-fashioned minstrel show.
And it's kind of the flip side of Kander and Ebb's favorite theme, which was expressed in Chicago, of the mistrial, the misjustice that happens. And in Chicago, you're kind of rooting for these murderers, baddies to get off and get more publicity. But in this, it's like, oh, look at how awful celebrity injustice is.
Yeah.
I think we have to not forget what for some people is the most anticipated new American play of the season, also on racial themes, which I believe you have pre-hated.
What's that?
Another target. Another target you painted.
A Free
on
Man of
somebody's
Color
back.
by John Guerra at Lincoln Center Theater.
Listen, I mean, it was supposed to be done at the Public a few years ago. It was really an unwieldy mess, from what I heard. It was like 700 pages long or something like that. Yeah, they've worked on it. George Wolfe, I think, is directing. He's a talented guy. Wears no slouch either. We'll see. Well, what is it about?
Jeffrey Wright plays a man in the years just before the Louisiana Purchase. You can go to sleep now, but we'll talk. Who is a free man of color who is wealthy and has his own slaves, I believe, and then the United States takes over by purchasing the territory, and his entire life and his role in society alters. But it begins as a comedy. I mean, it's told in a very interesting theatrical way, and with George Wolfe's imagination, I would expect it to be A, not 800 pages long anymore, and B, a really good evening.
What do you think, Michael?
I'm glad he's not playing a chauffeur.
I think you're referring to Driving Miss Daisy.
Yes, he was.
I got it. No, I got it.
Michael,
What do you have to say about this?
I think you're the last person to put a target on this back because you were complaining that American playwrights are not writing political plays.
Yeah, well,
This country-
that wasn't a call for a play about the Louisiana Purchase.
But I think it must have contemporary resonance.
Of course it
oh,
does.
In some
yes,
way.
I'm sure. Ben will find all
but
that
I
stuff.
mean, the thing about it is this country's in the middle of a nervous breakdown, and nobody is writing plays about it. I mean, yeah, David Hare and a lot of British playwrights are really writing political plays with a lot of energy behind them, and they're leaving us totally in the dust. And I think that when a play like Free Man of Color or even Driving Miss Daisy comes up, I think we should be, sort of encouraging it.
How
not
does Driving Miss
discouraging it.
Daisy have anything to do with the current
I think
situation in America?
it tells us about ourselves and about the racial question, which has a lot of things to do with our president and the people that are throwing, things.
I don't know, Michael. He's making Lombardi sound better and better to me every minute.
He's making Elf sound better.
I agree with you, darling. Now they're bringing back. Angels in
Yes,
America.
speaking of that, now we're going to
right.
get off Broadway. We're going to have the entire, God help us, Tony Kushner canon, including, I think, that awful
Why do you
play
say
called
it that
Bright
way? You
Room
say
Called
it like it's
Day.
a horrible chore. Angels in America was
Overrated.
was a thrilling 2 nights in the theater.
And I hear it's great. I hear it's absolutely great.
I could not disagree
It's
with
done
you
on a
more.
smaller scale, though, now off
It
Broadway.
is done on a smaller scale and a
they
smaller
play
pay scale
instruments.
too.
Well, I mean, is it a masterpiece, Michael? You were there for the
Absolutely.
original.
I have to say it's the defining play or 2 plays of the modern age. It was something that reflected the time so powerfully that it totally transformed me. So I really resent your bullying.
Yeah.
You really can't wait for those long speeches, those long poetic speeches on Antarctica. Remember those scenes? Remember those
Michael
scenes, Patrick?
Greif, I think, is again because it's
The director, Michael
Greif, again because he's got a limited budget. I bet has come up with really inventive theatrical language to. I agree with Michael and with Jesse. It's a brilliant classic play. Can
And
hardly wait to see it.
they trimmed 3 minutes.
I don't know. You guys are bored. You're co-opted by Spider-Man. You're co-opted by Tony Kushner. So much for
what are you
objectivity.
rooting for, Michael? What would you
Nothing.
invest
I
in?
don't root for anything.
Well, and there we have it.
This whole Angels in America, you guys really are all in the tank. I mean, I've heard that no less than 7 pieces are in the works over at the New York Times about Angels in America. I mean, have you lost all
Can't they just
objectivity about
rerun
Tony
the old
Kushner?
pieces?
The early ones.
Why are you in the thrall of this man?
Well, I think it's kind of insulting to say it's a thrall. If people, it's when you go online and you read people's responses to the critics, they're always saying the New York Times has gotten to. They think that there's a group at the Times that decides which shows that are going to get 40 articles. It's because individuals respond to the work. We all 3 happen to respond to the work. That's all there is to it. You didn't. That's fine, but it doesn't mean that we're in somebody's thrall. That said, I'm writing about Tony Kushner.
I'm writing about Tony Kushner too. And Michael,
I'm writing about Tony Kushner.
I knew it.
you can't respond to the work, Michael, when you haven't seen it. Remember that.
I saw the original production, and once with Angels in America was enough for me. Personally, I'm rooting for Lombardi. I think it is the sleeper hit of the season. It's
Who
about
was Lombardi?
It's
A famous football
Famous
coach.
coach.
From Green Bay.
The Book of Mormon, I think, is coming this season by the South Park guys, and
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's
that's
fun
in
because the
spring.
Mormons are the ones who fought against gay marriage, but they're nice except for Marie Osmond. And I think it's going to be fun. I really think it's going to be edgy. The edgy kind of fun that you'll be looking for in Pee-wee Herman will be in Book of Mormon.
And
Okay.
Jesse, aside from
Off Broadway, In the Wake, a new play by Lisa Krohn, whose plays I've really loved.
yes, I hear that's a very good play.
At the
There's a
Public.
lot of buzz about that.
And Lynn Nottage has a new play, by the way, Vera Stark, at Second Stage. The great Lynn Nottage.
Who wrote
did
Ruin.
Ruin.
Terrific play.
Again, at least she's doing political plays out there.
Right. I personally, Wonderland, the Frank Wildhorn show. I think that Frank is finally going to show to us that he is a great Broadway
Okay,
composer.
say goodnight, Gracie.
You're going to invest, Michael?
No. I, unlike this panel, am uncompromised as a journalist.
Don't start.
Oh, that was your
We're going to
funniest.
meet you out in the hallway.
All right.
Colleen Scott Rudin.
Jesse Green, in the pocket of Spider-Man and Angels in America from New York Magazine. Thank you for being our guest.
Thank you.
Michael Musto, in the pocket of Tony
But still wearing thrift shop clothes.
Kushner, who has now become a producer, by the way, right?
Yes, it's called Perfect Harmony at 45 Bleecker. It's about warring a cappella bands in a high school.
Have you put your own money into the show?
Are you crazy? I didn't get that much from Tony Kushner.
Patrick Pacheco, in the pocket of so many people, it makes my head spin.
I'm investing in Perfect Harmony, Michael.
I like this guy.
All right. Thank you all for being our guests on Theater Talk, and we'll have you back to look at the spring.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.